Welcome everybody. It's good to have everybody here in church, and I know that we have a number of people who are joining us by live stream. For the people in church, it may look a little odd. I'm looking beyond you. That's because there's a camera in the back. We have a couple cameras up here in front too. Last week we had a number of problems with our audio, and so we decided to move up here into church because we have all our equipment is up here, so it just works out better to have our meetings up here. So we just watched, for the people who are at home, of course I'm Father Jamie Zeminski from All Saints Church here, and we're going to be having people watching through the week too. A number of people came on during the week to watch the recorded videos both on Facebook and YouTube, so we had a lot of people who participated in watching the video unformed and then joining us later to look at the discussion. We just finished watching episode 2, and the title for episode 2 was Who Are You? Who Are You? Who Are You? So, maybe if I could just start out with just a little bit of summary of this episode of The Search. One thing about The Search, it's not starting from a position of faith, really. It's looking at what anybody can observe. And that was very clear in this video. In this video, they talked about the universe and how all sorts of statistics about the planets and galaxies, things that we're able to measure by science. We looked at the human body and cells and how everything is kind of constructed so that we can have life. And then looking historically what we know about how life formed and how unique it is. So you don't have to be a believer, you don't have to believe in God, you don't even have to believe in Jesus to be able to see those things and understand them, to know them with our minds. But then they take it the next step. And they say, well, if we're looking at things as we can observe them in our experience, well, then we can't discount the things that go beyond our physical body and our physical experience, which are many. The experience of being loved, the experience of something beyond this world, that there's something beyond our physical senses, that there's something else out there. The fact that we have drives, that things in this world just don't fill us up, they don't make us happy. We were created for something else. So that's a basic summary of this last video, Who Am I? Or Who Are You? Well, tonight, for our discussion, we've got the people here in the church, but we also have Mary and Gary Whitmer from our parish here, from All Saints, and also Dan Howes and his son Vincent. And so Vinny and Dan are here also to kind of be part of our lead discussion. Of course, anybody else in the church, feel free to jump in as we get going here. So one of the first things, maybe to get the discussion going, towards the beginning of the video, Chris Stefanik, the host, was talking about all sorts of different factors that needed to be present for human life to develop. And so that he took it in terms of when an asteroid hit the world down in the Yucatan, just created the conditions that made it possible for human beings to kind of grow and live in this world. But then he also talked about just the fact that throughout history, you had to go way back, that certain people had to meet certain people in order for us to be here today. So what he suggested, he said, okay, you could look at your life and say, well, at some point a bunch of molecules crawled out of a primordial sludge. Or you can look at our experience and say, no, there's got to be something more than that. As you heard those statistics, especially from our 4 front panelists here, any thoughts as you heard that? Did that strike a note of truth for you, perhaps?
Well, I'm not sure what statistics you're actually talking about, unless you're referring to how many trillion cells that each of us are 37 trillion cells compared to the size of the universe and the galaxies. But I just find it interesting that, if you look at everything from a relative perspective, I mean, we're really, amazing creatures.
Yeah.
I mean, we're each our own, universe, to say. And when you put all, 7 billion universes on planet Earth, and you start looking at it from that way, I mean, we just look a lot more special than just, another animal, as some people would call us.
Absolutely, Dan. And, that I think that was probably the main first point that he made. That we may seem very small. That for those people who got to see the video, there may be some people watching at home that didn't see the video yet, the second episode, or there may be some people who will watch us during the week and not have seen the second episode. But that's a big part of his first point. We're so unique. All of us are so unique. I'll quote Pope John Paul II. He said, "We are unrepeatable." We are unrepeatable. I think Pope Benedict used the same phrase. We are unrepeatable. So to think that a human person is insignificant when we are so unique, and the conditions for us being here, I think Christophanic, I prefer unrepeatable, but I think Christophanic said, "You're strange." So we've got a lot of strange people here in Gladstone. So, but yeah, we're very unique. What it does make you pause, because so many people think they're not unique. They think they are not important, that they're not special, and we just run into that so much today.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's only one of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's never been another one before. There won't be another one again. And when you look at it that way, the history of the world, it's hard to imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. What else may have stood out from the video for you? Maybe we'll take it that way. What would have stood out for you as you were watching? What other things might have stood out for the video?
I think starting from the premise that we're each unique also heightens your awareness that nobody's dispensable.
Yeah.
That we're all part of a bigger scheme, and that no one has the right to sort of diminish another person's value. And I really appreciated when the gentleman, spoke up, and that even historically, when some human beings considered other human beings property, their inherent dignity was there no matter how the world defines them. That the ensoulment is from God alone, that our dignity is not something we earn, it's not something that's based on status, it's given to us by God, that we're ensouled, and our dignity is inherent in that.
Yeah, you know what, while we talk about that for a few minutes, let's talk about the soul, because that was a big part of the video. He started, they talked about the body, so much about the experience of the body, and I thought that was a really good image that he used. So the one guy said, well, if all of a sudden I woke up after a month and realized I'd been in an accident, if all I am is my biology, well, what if I'm missing my hand from an accident, or what if I don't have my legs anymore? Does that mean I'm less human because I don't have those things? Well, no, of course not. You're still human. You still have those same rights. You still have that same dignity. What if you don't have? What about people who are not as intelligent as other people, or not as talented as other people? Or what about people who are able to accomplish great things? Does that mean they're worth more? So all of a sudden, when they start quantifying humanity based on your biology or your abilities, that one question that he asked I thought was really good. How much do I lose from my body before I'm not human anymore? How many fingers do I have to lose before I'm not considered, because I don't have rights anymore? I thought that was a good question. So, yes, Bonnie.
Look at the man who had a stroke at 43, and he was totally, he literally wasn't moving any part of his body, and they thought he was probably in a coma, I'm sure, until they realized he could blink one eye, and he managed to write a book. So his inner mind.
Yeah, he was still there.
It was working, where he wrote a book. You imagine by blinking an eye, one eye.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, for those who might not have been able to hear behind Bonnie, and for people who are watching on the live stream, let me just repeat that. So there was a story in the video about a man who at a very young age, 46, I think it was, 43, 46, something like that. He had was it stroke? It was a stroke. And so his body was rendered useless pretty much. He couldn't move anything. So they put him into a care facility where they're just going to house him, I guess, until he passed. But he was totally conscious. And the only way he could communicate was by just moving his eye a little bit. It kind of sounds like a Stephen King novel, doesn't it? Actually, I think he wrote a short story that is exactly that. Someone who they thought he was dead and he couldn't move. So they were going to do an autopsy on him, so he was fully conscious. It's a Stephen King fan, anyway. So, well, and that, I'm sure most of the people in the room here has had some experiences with people who have been either in a coma or have been pronounced dead or passed on. Maybe someone in this room has even had that experience where they were so sick or in an accident and their body stopped functioning. I certainly have been in those situations many times with people where they were physically passed. And I was just reading about 3 weeks ago, there was a new article published. A physician has been doing a lot of studies because he was fascinated by these near-death experiences where people were resuscitated. So their heart stopped, and so there was no life anymore, and yet they could tell you what was going on in the emergency room. They could tell you what was going on in the waiting room. They could repeat conversations. They could tell you who came in the room. They know all those things. I've certainly had experiences where I've gone into a room after someone has died, and I pray for them, and their appearance changes as I'm praying with them. Now, is there something physical happening there? Are the muscles relaxing? I don't know, I suppose, yeah, but or are they hearing what I'm saying? Are they praying with me? I've just had that happen too many times to think that it's, I'd have to be foolish to ignore it. That's the thing, everyone's big about following science today, but when their experience or the science doesn't match, then they'll look for something else if it doesn't match what they want to say. So it's pretty clear something else is going on. And this doctor who was doing this study, the one that I read just about 3 weeks ago, had talked about that there are so many people have those kind of experiences that I think his statistic was 90% report that they have those kind of experiences when they die and then they are resuscitated. They have some kind of experience to talk about after they've been resuscitated. He said so many people, that's a common experience, that the people who study it now look at that and say, probably it happens to everyone, but the ones who don't report it have forgotten it or were unable to retrieve the memory because of either the trauma of their experience or the medication that they were given in order to resuscitate them, or the medications that they're on. But it's such a common experience that they're thinking that, at least the ones who are studying this particular phenomenon, they feel like it's something that everybody has, which points to something beyond our experience. So if something's going on when you're physically dead, when your biology is not working, it points to something beyond this world. Vicky, yeah.
It struck me when he said that even after this world is gone, that the earth is gone, that our soul will live on for eternity.
Yeah. So the comment is that what Chris Stefanik said in the movie, in the video, after the world is gone, after Mount Everest has eroded, our soul continues. Our soul continues because one of the things he said, one of the other people on the video talked about the soul is eternal, meaning that it is outside of time. It's not bounded by time. It doesn't have an end to it. It doesn't have an end to it. So long after Mount Everest crumbles, after people will come and go, empires rise and fall, but our souls continue. Because it's in the image and likeness of God. That's what faith tells us, and our experience tells us it's beyond the limits of this world. So yeah. Dan.
Yeah, and as I was watching it, I just found it interesting, how the physical world and the spiritual world are separate, yet they're the same. Or not the same, but
They work together.
they work together. And physically they were talking about the brain surgeon was able to make a guy's hand move. Medicine can keep a heartbeat and can keep someone alive. So we have the means to physically keep someone alive, to meet their physical needs. And that kind of relates to your homily this past weekend, where, we're not happy just by meeting our physical needs. We can be happy for a week, a day, for a little time physically, but there's something else that we're constantly after and yearning. And to me, that's the spiritual side that we're going after. And that's, with these near-death experiences, that's, I think, what's happening. It's leaving the physical body's dying, and then the spiritual realm, and it just kind of, everything like opens up. Yeah. As the blind person in real life can't see, then they pass on, everything like opens up. I just think that's the whole spiritual realm that they're coming into.
Well, and I wish I had, you mentioned my homily from this weekend. Thank you for listening to that. It's very flattering. But the...
My wife brought me here.
She brought you here, yeah, okay. Well, I'm just thinking, that whole idea of we have all these desires, and then we try and fill them. It becomes the bottomless pit, and sin drives us to that. Like we find all this stuff we keep loading in, but nothing satisfies. And I wish I had heard the quote from C.S. Lewis that they ended the video on, the episode, about if everything in this life, if we are always looking, searching for something, and we are never satisfied in this life, well, that the obvious conclusion is that it's pointing to something else, something more that's beyond this life. And it's fascinating to me that people of faith from all over the world, all different kinds of religions, they look towards that same kind of end. They may have different ways of approaching it, but there's something beyond this world, that this world doesn't satisfy it, and every time we try and satisfy it in this world, we're not gonna make it. So we have to keep our eyes on the next world. I mean, that's pretty common to religious faiths, no matter what it is. So people of faith come to that conclusion. Well, how do they come to that conclusion? By looking at their experience. So to think that there isn't something beyond this world just doesn't make sense then. You have to kind of come to that conclusion. One of the things we're coming up on, I'm just going to watch, my eyes are getting bad, so it always takes me a little while to read my watch these days, but we got about 5 or 10 minutes left. because everybody here has been sitting here for about an hour, and I know that I always say that church is a lot like being in an elevator. You face one direction. You don't touch each other. You don't want to do that. It creates a bit of a panic. And the other thing, too, is if you're stuck in an elevator or a church for longer than an hour, then you really start to panic. So we'll call it quits in just a few minutes here. So, but as we're coming to the end, I promised you I wouldn't put you on the spot, Vinny, but I'm going to put you on the spot if I could. Vinny, you kind of represent a younger group among us. So your generation gets a bad rap, I think, for always being focused on now. And do you really find that among your friends? Well, maybe not your friends, but among people your age.
Well, a lot of my friends and that, they focus on things that are happening now, but they don't really focus on the things that happened in the past.
Yeah. What about the future?
Well, they hope for good things in the future, but they don't reflect on the things they did in the past that can help a good future.
Yeah. Once in a while on the weekend, there's a couple of channels that will run, like a movie series, like it'll be an Indiana Jones weekend or a James Bond weekend, and every now and then I have to, I'll be eating my lunch or something, and I'll flip on the TV, and it's the only thing on. Harry Potter weekends, those kind of things, Star Wars weekends. Once in a while, what were those vampire movies a couple of years ago? What were the Twilight movies, and I have to suffer through those on my lunches on the weekend. And on one of them, there was this guy, a young man who was a vampire, but I suppose he was like 300 years old. Who knows? But he was in love with this human person and a human woman, and she said, "Oh, I want to be a vampire so we could spend eternity together." And he said, "No, you don't want to be a vampire for eternity." And she goes, "I don't care about eternity." And I thought, "Oh, that's the problem. I don't care about eternity." Young people get that bit. They're kind of lumped into that group. They don't care about eternity. They're focused on now. Do you think it's even possible to get young people to focus on eternity?
I really don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. I guess when you get older, it's easier. You're thinking more about the end. Yeah. Gary, you haven't said much tonight. That's uncharacteristic. What did you take out of this video?
Well, I think of a lyric from a song that God is eternity. Jesus is eternity. So eternity stepped into time so we can understand.
Yeah.
And then I think talking about the soul and how we love. And so I think God stepped into time. So to understand what's going to happen in the future, the true way what's going to happen is by believing in God.
Yeah.
And seeing what He has to teach us.
And for those people who couldn't hear back there, just to say, what Gary was just pointing out, and a lot of that episode talked about some of the intangible things, love and knowledge, those kind of things that they were talking about, being able to understand things. And those are not the biological things. Those are something deeper, something that point beyond ourselves. And as Gary rightly pointed out, at least in our tradition, in the Christian tradition, we see God as being eternal, and this timeless being stepped into, well, I guess God's not a being, but the timeless one stepped into our time, into our experience, and brought with it, and God brought into our world not just timelessness, but also grace. Think about that. I'm sure we'll hit that as we go along, but that's another big thing, because we live in a world of justice, so you get what you deserve here in this world. If you work for 8 hours, you get paid for 8 hours. If you don't get paid for 8 hours, that's unfair. That's not just. If you get paid for more than 8 hours, well, that's not fair either. And then God comes into this world through Jesus, and all of a sudden, yeah, I just love you. You didn't deserve this. You don't earn this. So God also brought gratuitous grace into the world in addition to eternity. So otherwise we wouldn't get to heaven, you know. It has to be through grace. There was one thing I wanted to... this is one thing that I would take away. One of the things that I would take away is that a person of intelligence, a person of logic, has to look at the information that they provided there and say, yeah, there's got to be something beyond this world. You can't just... there's a wider purpose here. And remember the first video, the first episode of why are we here? Well, it's, you know, you want to be happy. You know, that's the motivation. You want to be happy in this world. Well, nothing in this world makes you happy. And so this video talked about, well, there's got to be something beyond this world. And that's where they're moving there, of course, I think that's going to make us happy. That is what's going to make us happy. I used to be the chaplain at Northern Michigan University, and one evening I went out to Presque Isle. It's right off of, there's a lighthouse out there, and they had the old ore docks out there. It's a nice little park on the island. And there's also a break wall that goes way out to a little lighthouse. And I went out for a walk with one of our students, one of our college students in our campus ministry, and we were walking by the break wall, and he said, "Did you ever go out there?" And it was a nice day. And I said, "No, I've never been out there." He said, "Well, come on." So we head out on the break wall, and there's all these gigantic boulders. And I happen to know that the boulders supposedly had been, there's other rocks, large rock formations not too far from there, and they supposedly blew them apart, and then they put these boulders on barges and floated them over, and then lined them up to make the break wall. And it makes this perfect break wall. So to get out to the lighthouse, you have to jump on all these giant boulders. And they've been there for decades and decades and decades, you know. Now people are going to be, texting in or emailing in on Facebook or something saying, "No, that's not true. That was 200 years ago," and they're going to correct all my history. But it's very clear. It's a nice clean break wall with the lighthouse on the end there. And the storms are really bad. People have been killed that have gone out there and messed around during storms out on the break wall. And I remember going out to the lighthouse with this student, and he says, "This is a really cool thing." He wasn't from Marquette. He said, "This is really cool out here." I said, "Yeah, it is." I said, "For me, it's proof that God exists." He said, "What do you mean? It's proof that God exists?" I was just being smart, you know. And I said, "Well, if I said to you that these rocks just got kind of piled up, you know, through erosion, you know, the glaciers kind of left these giant boulders in this very perfect line that creates this little break wall, would you say that that's possible? You know, that the glaciers that formed the Great Lakes created this perfect break wall?" He said, "Well, of course not," because he knew the story too. He said, "No, it came from over there. They floated them over on barges." I said, "Well, okay, if you can figure out, just by looking at a bunch of pile of rocks, that someone designed this and figured out how to make this, then if you look at the human hand and saw all the bones and all the muscles moving so that you could do this, you know, how can you look at that and say there's no God?" You know, someone figured this out. You can't just say that just as someone designed it to be this way. And someone designed us to desire stuff beyond this world. Someone designed us so that we wouldn't be satisfied now but it's going to drive us to be satisfied sometime in the future, in a different experience. So yeah, the break wall for me, it was a proof that God existed, and I think that's a big part of what this episode was about, just showing us that there is something beyond this world. I just happen to know that the next episode, I believe, is called Why God? Why God? So I think that's the direction we're moving in. Before we close, anybody else have anything that they wanted to offer about the video? Something that they saw that they found interesting or particularly true? Yeah, Joanne?
I'm once again in this wonderful universe where all the other rational people are, or creatures, or human existence.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the first part, Joanne. Could you just pull your mask down a little bit?
I don't believe that we are the only ones
Oh, you don't believe we're the only ones?
in this universe.
Pope, you're in good company. I think Pope Francis said pretty much the same thing. What Joanne said was it's hard to believe that we'd be the only rational beings in the whole universe. But until they pop in, I'll take your word for it. It's a big world.
It could make sense, though.
Sure.
We're the only ones.
It could be.
But you mean that in another universe, Jesus would have to die in that universe too, for the redemption of our sin?
Well, but what about other people in this universe?
Oh, this universe.
Yeah. Was it Pope Francis? Yeah, it was Pope Francis who said, well, if aliens show up, they show up, you know? So
They're already here.
they're already here.
Yeah.
They usually sit in the back over there on that side over when they come to Mass.
I'm talking about the Democrats.
Oh,
No, I won't get started.
oh, please, yes. Yes.
I like that.
I figured you would.
So anybody else had anything to offer? Yes, Roger.
There's comments in there about our uniqueness as people. Today, with all our violence going on, and instead of people enjoying each other's differences, everybody gets angry and wants to fight. It's a shame that we can't enjoy our uniqueness and have good conversations and not get angry, and just appreciate how God made us, that we're all different. And even with my family, we have 4 children, and each one's different. And there's a unique beauty in each one of them. God didn't make them the same. So it's really beautiful how He's done it.
Yeah, for those of you who might not have been able to hear that, Roger's talking about the episode talked about people's uniqueness and how beautiful that is, and how strange it is that we don't celebrate the beauty of uniqueness, and instead it turns to disagreement and violence in our culture today. That is true. You know, I did a retreat once when I was the director of Marygrove, where we did this. It was with all men that were at the retreat. We did this thing where you looked at your personalities and the uniqueness of your own personality and why you did something. And at first, all the guys that were there were kind of skeptical. Roger, I think you were at that retreat, actually. All the guys who were at that retreat were skeptical. Well, why are we doing this? It seems like a lot of work, you know, just filling out these ovals and trying to figure out what kind of personality you had. And then when we started describing, you know, okay, if this is your personality, and everyone's kind of like going, oh, yeah, that's right, I just like that. Well, can you imagine if you have this personality, and let's say your spouse or someone you work with or someone on your Knights of Columbus Council has this kind of personality, can you see why you'd have clashes? And all of a sudden, lights are going on, like, oh, I'm this person, and the guy I work with is that kind of person. We're just really different. Or my spouse is like this and I'm like that. That's why we are fighting about this all the time. And it's just that we're just different people. Well, the funny thing about it was, after we started going through this personality inventory, all of a sudden a bunch of guys started catching me in the hallway during the break saying, Father, do you have any of those blank sheets? Because I want to take this home and give it to my wife. because then she'll understand why we're so different. So cut down on the violence, and disagreement. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight. For those people watching on live stream, thank you very much for joining us, and for all the people who will be joining us later on in the week by watching the recordings of this, thank you for being part of this. We will watch episode 3 here in the church at a watch party next week at 6:30 again, and we will be able to do our live stream discussion again at 7 o'clock. I just want to mention also tomorrow night we're having Stations of the Cross here in the church. So Stations of the Cross at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, and also at 6:30 on Wednesday we're having our next episode of Be My Disciples. So Be My Disciples will be that's our family religious education live stream, and that will be on Wednesday at 6:30. Of course, we always have our Sunday masses, our Saturday and Sunday masses, and we live stream the 10:30 Mass on Sunday. But I did have a couple people call this week wondering if we were having in-person masses yet. And we are having in-person masses. People can come to masses. We socially distance. And I do want to make a quick comment. Last week, someone expressed a concern on Facebook that we weren't wearing masks last week. And it's very true. The panel was not wearing masks, just like our panel is not wearing a mask, and I'm not wearing a mask tonight. But on video, it may look different, but we are socially distanced. We're all pretty far away from each other. Probably farther than what the cameras make us look. And everybody else who is here are socially distanced, and they're wearing their masks. So I think the person who added a concern last week probably wasn't familiar with our parish, that we are very careful about social distancing and all sorts of protocols. We go beyond what our diocese has asked us to do here at All Saints. So I do thank you all for coming. Maybe we could just close with a brief prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, thank you so much for allowing us to gather together tonight. We ask your blessing upon us and upon our families. We're very grateful for the friendships that we have and our parish life. Through our being here tonight, Lord, please draw us closer to you and to each other, and help us, especially during this Lenten season, to be mindful of all the people who are in need around us. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.